Welcome back. In this segment, the blending is pretty much done right now. I've got the sketch turned back on at full value so you can see the forms rather easily. Let me turn it off for a moment and you can see the difference from what we had before and what we had now. Now it's really starting to look like a real figure standing there. It's still lacking any precision detail, but all of the forms are roughed in. And let's zoom in here a bit. And you can see that we're ready to begin detailing, except for, well, I'm looking here and it looks like I did not finish blending this area. We still have some fairly hard edges. Now, a few hard edges is not a big deal. As a matter of fact, they can give a piece some, they can give the surface some real texture. They can give it a bit of dynamism. You can see we've got some hard edges going on here, and they look fine. However, this is just a little bit too much. I'd like to go ahead and blend those out, but I've got my nice fine line there, and I don't want to risk doing something like that and destroying that fine edge. So I'm going to use a special tool in Photoshop. I'm going to take my tunic layer, and I am going to lock the transparency. We've got several lock buttons up here. The paintbrush button will lock you from doing any painting on that layer. This little arrow thingy here will keep you from locking any movement. This will lock everything. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lock the transparency. So now if I go to the edge, whoosh, I can't paint past the edge. All right, but that's not exactly the direction I want to paint, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to do some blending with my blending tool. And not a lot, not a lot. I don't want to ruin this this nice juxtaposition of dark and light here. I'm going to turn the strength down just a bit here. I don't want to move the pixels too far. I just want to blend the edges in some. All right, and I'm going to work this just a little bit to make it look a little more realistic. And I've got a couple of other areas here, and that's one of the problems you have when you're working with the ink layer or the sketch layer turned on, is you can't always see these edges because sometimes they're obscured by your ink line or pencil line if you work from a pencil. You can see I've got the same thing going on down here. So I'm just going to do some very rough blending, and you can see how I'm not disturbing the other layers, because I'm only blending on the tunic and I can't blend out past the edges because I have the transparency locked. Makes the whole process a lot quicker, and you can be a lot more aggressive because you don't have to worry about destroying any edges. All right, so now I've got the main forms not only blocked in for light and shadow, but I have got the surface blended to give it a much more naturalistic look. So we're going to work on the face next. So I'm going to go to the skin layer, and I'm going to turn the ink layer back on, but I don't want it nearly that much. I just want the barest suggestion. So I'm going to go down to around 10% or so if I can here. 10%, and that will give me just the guideline. Oops. That'll give me the guideline of where I'm going to work with. And I'm going to change brushes now. I've been working with this pastel type of brush. I'm going to work with a soft round brush. These are some of the default brushes that come with Photoshop. And again, I'm going to lock the transparency on this skin so that I don't accidentally paint out where I don't want to paint. And now I'm going to start working in some detail. And I want to keep these somewhat short, these videos, so I'm not going to, you probably won't see the entire face done here, but you'll see an indication of what we're going to do. So I'm going to pick up a color here. I want my brush to be at 100% strength. Let's get the right size brush. So we're going to go with about like that 9% or 9 pixel brush. And that size is going to vary just depending on what the resolution of your drawing is. So let's work on this mouth a little bit here. Oops, don't want to work with that color. So let's work with, well, we had this gray, and this is the gray we started with for the skin. We're going to want to work with a darker color now because we're adding some detail. And detail is usually formed by the edge between light and shadow. So we're going to take this way down here, and we're going to multiply again. We're going to want to make existing pixels darker. I choose that instead of just painting with a darker color because I want to preserve some of this light to dark that we've got going on here. So let's work out this mouth. Now I'm going to be winding up with kind of a hard edge. It's going to look an awful lot like it does with the normal ink line, but I'm going to do some blending too here. So actually, I've already changed that blending brush. Let's take the strength down quite a bit. Let's take it down to around 35%, and we can make this much more subtle. Can do some blending here, and this is going to make it look a lot more realistic. I'm going to turn off this ink layer for just a minute so I can see the actual pixels I'm working with. And now I'm going to start actually working in detailed light and shadow. Now the Asta do not have a philtrum, which is that little divot in your lip, between the lip and the nose. It's one of the stylistic decisions I made when doing the design work. Is given the description, it sounded like being a designed race, a designed hybrid. There was no need to go into a lot of the complexity that a normal human face would have. So everywhere where I've got a facial feature, their mouths are small, their noses do not have a lot of the structures that a normal human nose would have. Their ears are simple. I mentioned in an earlier tutorial how there are no earlobes. So everything is simple. So we're going to go back to our brush now, right there, and oops, too dark. I want to work with, say about 10%. 10% multiply, and that will give me just enough to work from where I don't have an abrupt edge. And I might even want to go to like 5%, oops, 5% up here for working in this lip shadow. And so it's got to be a lot more subtle. Alright, and let's go with a softer edge. Let's go with the soft edge pixel. And there we go. Now, blend that out a little bit. Now I'm going to be switching some of my tools with keyboard commands, simply because I'm so used to it that it really is difficult for me to work any other way. So I'm going to describe if I change a tool, but you won't necessarily see me go over here and switch from the blend tool back to the brush tool. Alright, and so I'm going to work that a little bit more, working out that shadow. Now you have a little bit, let's see, a little bit darker there. Alright, and now I'm going to go back to my blend tool, make it a little bit smaller, and do some blend work to make that corner of that mouth much more subtle. Okay. And pull that shadow down a little bit so that the lip doesn't look quite so pronounced. Remember, we want to keep the facial features very simple on this race. And then finally we want a bit more highlight, so we're going to go back and we're going to pick up a value here. Go back to our brush tool, switch to our eyedropper and pick up a light value. We're going to switch from multiply back to screen, and we'll keep it at about 20% to begin with, just to see what that looks like. But since this is the highlight of, say, a lip, which usually has a bit of wetness to it, we'll make that that opacity value a little bit more, so we have a bit more of an abrupt edge. And we'll work that out there and give a little bit of highlight to the upper lip. And you can see now that our race is beginning to have some definition there. This is beginning to actually look like a realistic surface. Maybe not photographic, but we don't necessarily want photographic. We want something that is clear and interesting. I'm going to come back when we're doing a different facial feature or a different feature of the body or painting, and we'll do some more detailed work after that.